Greetings from Dr.Serena Margaret. Dear students, let's explore the multiple dimensions of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's famous TED Talk, The Danger of the Single Story. Adichie's The Danger of the Single Story, a TED Talk delivered in July 2009, explores the negative influences that a single story can have and identifies the root of these stories. Adichie argues that single stories often originate from simple misunderstandings or one's lack of knowledge of others, but that these stories can also have a malicious intent to suppress other groups of people due to prejudice. For example, a Westerner, if he thinks that people belonging to the African continent or people from America, the native Red Indians, they are barbaric and they lack intelligence. So, if they form such opinions, they are nothing but prejudice, and they don't know who these people actually are, what kind of special quality they have. They don't realize that, and they form an opinion that these people they are below the Westerners. So such kind of narratives are dangerous. People, especially in their childhood, are impressionable and vulnerable when it comes to single stories. So this particular thought occurs in the exact timing given within the parenthesis in her TED Talk. So here she means that the childhood stories, they have an everlasting impact on the children's mind. So whatever they read during their childhood, it gets registered in their mind, and they retain those thoughts unless and until they verify when they grow up as adults. So it is dangerous to just give some prejudiced thoughts in children's literature. So the writers, they must take it their duty to just write what is truthful, whichever literature they write, whether it is children's literature or the adult literature. So that is the danger of single narratives. Adichie asserts that media and literature available to the public often tell one story, which causes people to generalize and make assumptions about groups of people. Adichie states that her mother was proud of the fact that her daughter could start reading at the age of 2, but she states that she remembers that she could start reading only at the age of 4. She also shares her childhood experiences of reading British and American children's books. Growing up in Nigeria, she found that the characters in these stories were nothing like her or the people she knew. They were white, blue-eyed, and lived in a world of snow, apples, and discussions about the weather, elements that are entirely foreign to her reality. This early exposure to a single story, the Western narrative, led her to believe that literature must revolve around foreign experience. It wasn't until she discovered that African literature, she realized her own stories, her own culture, and her own people were worthy of being told. Adichie's early writing mirrored the foreign stories she read, with characters and settings that bore no resemblance to her life in Nigeria. This example underscores how powerful and impressionable stories can be, especially for young minds. This is an exact transcript from her talk where she talks about the stories that she has read, the foreign stories where they talked about eating apples and living in snow, whereas in Nigeria she had the experience of eating only mangoes, and there is nothing to talk about the weather. As we have seen, Adichie emphasizes that children are particularly impressionable and vulnerable, a point that we discussed a few seconds ago. This vulnerability shapes how they perceive themselves and others from an early age. The stories children are exposed to through books, media, and education form the foundation of their understanding of the world and different cultures. So, this early exposure of limited representation has the danger of having a lasting impact. Adichie quotes two instances where her early reading of Western children's books have influenced her. Her taste for tasting the ginger beer was due to her reading of children's literature of the Western writers, because the characters that she read about, they all drank ginger beer. Another instance is that she thought that books should have foreign characters in them. When she started writing, it was very early, at the age of 7, she started writing. And she thought that her book should have foreign characters because the books of the British writers and the American writers that she read as a child, they all had foreign characters in them with whom she could not actually recognize herself with, identify herself with. Her perception of literature changed after she started reading African literature. Those books were very limited, but her perception of literature changed entirely after she started reading Chinua Achebe and Kamara Lay. And this was a major shift in her perception. I'm quoting her exact words. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. So she states here that the perception and the appearance of the African people are totally different from the British and the American people. But African people, they could also be the characters of literature. So that she realized after reading the African writers. Adichie discusses the stereotypes that arise from single stories. Stereotype is a set idea on people or things, usually a wrong idea on people or things. She recounts the story of Fide, the houseboy who worked for her family when she was a child. The only thing she knew about him was that he was poor. This single narrative led her to view him and his family solely through the lens of poverty. However, when she visited his village and saw a beautifully crafted basket made by his brother, she realized how limiting her perception had been. The single story of poverty had blinded her to the creativity and richness of their lives. The story of Fide illustrates how single stories can reduce people to one dimensional figures, stripping away their individuality and complexity. This example highlights the danger of forming opinions based on limited information. Stereotypes are not always negative, but they are always incomplete. Adichie shares two primary examples to discuss why generalizations are made. Reflecting on her everyday life, she recalls a time where her roommate had a default position of well meaning pity towards her due to the misconception that everyone from Africa comes from a poor, struggling background. When Adichie left Nigeria to study in a university in United States of America, at the age of 19, she stayed there in the university campus, and her roommate was very much shocked to find Adichie's fluency in talking English. And she was also surprised when Adichie informed her that English was an official language in Nigeria. And her roommate asked Adichie to play for her some tribal music, and she was again shocked when Adichie showed her the tape of Maria Carey. She was also of the opinion that Adichie could not use a stove. So these misconceptions about Adichie showed the American roommate's preconceived notion about Africa. Adichie also clearly faults herself for being influenced by the single story herself, showing that she made the same mistake as many others did. Due to the strong media coverage on Mexican immigration, she had bought into the single story, automatically associating all Mexicans with immigration. These anecdotes emphasize how stereotypes are formed due to incomplete information, but one story should not define a group of people. When she actually went to Mexico, she could see the people to be cheerful and hardworking. So that was her real perception of those Mexicans in the right perspective. Adichie also tackles the effect of political and cultural power on stories. Power not only spreads a story but also makes its ideas persist. Adichie states that power can be used for malicious intent by way of harming people's good name or their cultural standpoint through controlling how stories are told, who tells them, when they are told, and how many stories are told. Using power to manipulate our understanding of others can be evidenced by Adichie's trip to Mexico, where she realized that Mexicans were not the harmful as presented by the American media. Adichie, in a nutshell, states that to create a single story, show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. For example, the narrative that the rural people are incapable of understanding the nuances of modern science. So, if this narrative gets repeated again and again, and people start thinking this generalization, imposed generalization, as a general truth, so that is the danger of it. Adichie's conclusion responds to these misconceptions by reiterating, that is, emphasizing the importance of spreading diverse stories in opposition to focusing on just one. She professes that the rejection of the single story phenomenon allows one to regain a kind of paradise and see people as more than just one incomplete idea.